All right, so welcome to the official start of the 2018 PPMD Conference. We're really, really happy that you're here. And I'm just going to give a few opening comments, and then we're going to get into the agenda itself. Let's back up. So here's my forward-looking statement, because all the companies make forward-looking statements, so I wanted to make a forward-looking statement too. So I believe in the Tina Fey approach. Say yes to all things, and then think about what you really need to do afterwards. So we can thank Tina Fey. And that's how we've built PPMD. Say yes to good ideas, say yes to advancing research, say yes to scientific questions, say yes to good care, say yes to parents. Do what we can to advance this field. So my forward-looking statement has things in it like hope, like master protocol or platform design, like newborn screening, like therapies for all, and access. So that's my forward-looking statement. We believe that we should have therapies, combined therapies, and every child everywhere should have access to them. So a lot's happened since 1994, yeah? So I thought you'd appreciate this. In 1994, Eric Hoffman and I sat together and we announced the first DMDRC, Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy Research Center. Because this followed with our first meeting when, after feeling like the few parents, Donna Sacamano and I were standing in a corner thinking, oh, this is really going to be bad, when the scientists and clinicians were looking at us saying, like, you are crazy parents. And then they started chatting about what was necessary, and they said centers of excellence would be really important, where you had a group of individuals who were focused on different aspects of research to get together and form a center of excellence so that they could drive therapies. So our first center of excellence, the Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy Research Center, was identified in 1994, and Eric Hoffman and I were at the University of Pittsburgh to announce just that. So we've come a long way. And you know, Eric Hoffman then went to Children's National Medical Center, had developed Synergy. You know, from Synergy, he's got Reverigen. So the world has evolved since 1994. So where are we in 2018? And I don't want to spend too much time on 94, although I was younger then, so I was happier. In 2018, the FDA finalized guidance. You'll recall that this community wrote draft guidance and submitted it to the FDA. And in 2018, the FDA finalized that guidance. So why is that important? Because draft guidance and the final guidance is a playbook for companies to enter this space, to understand Duchenne muscular dystrophy and how to conduct trials, and how to think about Duchenne and how to develop outcome measures, and how to get these therapies across the line so that our sons and the young men in the room can access these therapies. So this is really an important piece of data that the FDA developed for us, and it was really stimulated by the advocacy environment when we wrote that draft guidance, because we met with them and asked them to do that, and they said, no, we're not going to write draft guidance for Duchenne. It's never going to happen. So this community wrote draft guidance, then they followed with guidance and finalized in 18. So we're really happy about that. We've had meetings this year already in the first half of the year, some really important meetings. We've had our first clinician conference where more than 120 clinicians came together and looked at care and the upgraded care standards. We attended and participated in the European Neuromuscular Committee's meeting on nutrition, because nutrition's a big issue. What is the nutrition? What does the diet look like? What do the supplements look like? And I know from Facebook, the ultimate in medical information, people are on a range of supplements from 0 to 28 supplements a day. And what are they? And how much do they impact this disease? And how important are they? And what should we be doing? You'll see a paper coming out about that. We also held a meeting on contractures, because contractures develop in Duchenne muscular dystrophy, and sometimes as parents try as we might with stretching and AFOs and everything else, those contractures still develop. And then we feel really pretty guilty about that. So we wanted to ask the question, we like to ask a lot of questions about why do they develop, who's more likely to develop a contracture, and you'll see more information coming out about that. Recently participated in a bone health meeting in ENMC again, European Neuromuscular Committee on Bone Health. And we talked about when do you introduce those bone-sparing medicines? At the use of steroids, or when? How can you use those medicines to prevent fractures? Because we all know fractures are not a good thing in Duchenne, and often sometimes they limit mobility or end mobility. So fractures and preventing them is really going to be important, and you'll see more about that. We, again, asking questions, sometime back had a critical path innovation meeting, or better known in Washington, D.C. as All Things Must Be Acronyms, the CPIM meeting. So the CPIM meeting was really about asking the question, what is the role of inflammation? Does it change across the trajectory of this illness? Could we treat it better than we are doing now with steroids and steroid regimens? Could we treat it in a different way to lessen the side effects and really improve the way that we deal with inflammation in this disease? Because you have loss of dystrophin and an inflammatory response. So this is evolving, and late in this year, I think it's going to be December, we'll have a bigger meeting on inflammation to really tackle the question, how does it look? When does it begin? How does it evolve? And can we treat it better, maybe with some approved medicines or different regimens that spare us and our children the side effects of steroids? So that is ongoing. And you will hear from Abby Bronson about a master protocol. The idea of a master protocol is simple, and now it's going to be called a platform trial. I think I've got that right. So we're switching, so it's more understandable. One of the things that we learned from all of us together was we'd like less exposure to placebo. We'd like trials that are more inclusive and consider including all the boys across this trajectory of this illness. We'd like faster trials. We'd like trials that combine therapy. So if you went through a trial and tried one of those, we'll say an anti-myostatin, then maybe you need something to improve the mitochondria of the cell, or reduce inflammation, or reduce fibrosis, or get the gene expressed in terms of dystrophin. So how can we get there? So we think in a platform design study, this could happen, less exposure to placebo, more inclusiveness, and get to combinations. Because right now, with the length of each study, with each company building a house essentially and conducting a trial, and then taking that house down after the trial, if we could develop a bigger house where everyone joins in trials, and we get to those trials, understand who's responding, who's not responding, and get to combinations, that's where we want to go. So you'll hear more about that. So in January, we also had some other really exciting things. Nationwide Children's initiated its first gene therapy study. So we were very excited to provide Nationwide with a grant for an investigator-initiated study, and that was underway. Also, Kevin Flanagan initiated the GAL-GT2 study with regional delivery. So we had exciting gene therapy opportunities. Pfizer initiated its gene therapy study as well, and also Solid initiated. So we're on the road of gene therapies, which is incredibly exciting, and I think we could all agree, get dystrophin back. Express it, replace it, but get it back in there. And so from January to March, we have that ball rolling, which feels really good for our community, and you'll be hearing more about that. In 2018, the CDC upgraded or released the updated care considerations, which is a really big deal. And this is an intensive effort on the part of CDC and all of the specialists you know to really create standards of care, better known as care considerations, and update what was done in 2010. So why is that important? It's because now we have a handbook of what does optimal care look like. And so we can measure that care at whatever place you're getting your care, so you can assure yourself and your family that your son is receiving the appropriate care at his age and getting the appropriate interventions that are available. So that happened. So that's pretty good as well. So we've had pretty exciting 2018. This was perhaps one of the most important things, an ICD-10 code. Before this, the International Classification of Disease, where diseases are coded and this is how they're billed and you know how all that goes, we didn't have one for Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We were looking at a code that really included all of the neuromuscular diseases together in one lump sum. And that's hard when you're trying to get services. It's hard when you're trying to get equipment. It's hard when we're tracking data. If we're looking into records, healthcare records, if it's all under this one thing, how do you differentiate it? You can, but it's really, really hard. So this is Annie Kennedy and a team of people from our group really worked on the ICD-10 code. And now I'm happy to say that that is in place, and it will be in place in October. So we are now well characterized in all of the muscular dystrophies that they've mapped, and Duchenne now has its own ICD-10 code. So it should make it, I will never say easy because I haven't seen the word easy applied to Duchenne anywhere along the way, but let's say it'll make it more approachable to get the services, the equipment, and hopefully the therapies we need. And also for all of us to track the data to understand what this trajectory looks like, how there are changes or differences in the trajectory, and be able to do better and more research with less noise in the data. So here's what we thought, right? This was going to be easy. Stage 1, a prescription. When we get an approval, doc writes a prescription. Stage 2, it goes into all of the cycles. And then stage 3, we just get access. In this country, in the US, we have 2 approvals, Exondys 51 and Emflaza. And you know what? It wasn't quite that simple. So we had hoped it would be simple, but we found that access and reimbursement are challenges in and of themselves, and we, PPMD, are working with a number of others, and Annie Kennedy and Ryan in particular from our staff are working with others on access and reimbursement. That shouldn't have to be a challenge. It seems to me that we got these approvals, so we should have access to them, and they should be reimbursed. Families are already stretched beyond their limits financially with this disease, so we need access and reimbursement. So that's not what exactly happened. We also have continued FDA engagement. We've had meetings with the Division of Neurology. We had a policy forum in 2013, as you know, and if we bring it up to 2018, in February at our advocacy meeting, we had a COMPASS meeting. So again, an acronym in Washington is PFDD, Patient-Focused Drug Development. This is in the legislation that really the FDA has to pay attention to. The FDA provided a framework for their PFDD meetings, and we wanted to follow that framework. But we wanted to also go outside the framework, because why would we ever want to do things exactly as written, right? So in order to really accomplish that, we invited people from all sorts of different environments, access environments, reimbursement environments, to listen to this COMPASS meeting, which is what is it like to have Duchenne. It was a really important aspect of this meeting. You'll be seeing this report. It follows PFDD and then stretches it a little beyond the limits. So I think you'll be pleased about the COMPASS meeting. We now have a new path for access. So this is, you'll see the paths for access down here, and I won't go through them. We know that there's an expanded access pathway, there's a compassionate use pathway, and now there's a right to try pathway. So how does it work? Who does it apply to? You're going to hear from companies that they are or are not going to use right to try pathways, and for what reasons. Because there are really logical reasons that it's a difficult pathway. And frankly, because it is new legislation, we have to work out all of the sort of gory details of how that works. The right to try pathway is in existence, actually, in the FDA called compassionate use. Compassionate use pathway enables a doctor to write a prescription, a patient to be willing, and a company to be willing to give the drug. Right to try takes that a little further outside of the FDA environment. And again, this is new legislation, will have to be worked on, but it is difficult. But we want you to understand what the pathways are, and we can have discussions about what all of those pathways are and how they may or may not apply to your son. We now have this robust pipeline that is pretty incredible. When my sons were here, there was no pipeline, there were no companies, and in fact, there were no standards of care. So the world has changed since 1984 when they were diagnosed, and 1994 when we started, and certainly today, things are really changing. Our question for everyone is, how can we make them change faster? Because we really need the therapies yesterday. So, gene therapy and Nationwide and Sarepta had results that they discussed in an R&D day just, I think, a week ago. I'm losing track of days, but we had Sarepta held an R&D day when they announced the first children who had received gene therapy and what they were seeing. So these are very, very early days. You're going to hear more about that. I think there's incredible excitement over gene therapy, whether it's Solid or Pfizer or Sarepta Nationwide. We're really in a new era of Duchenne, and the quicker the better. I think we'd all like to line up today, but again, I assure you that these are early days and we have still lots of questions to ask, lots of things to get to know, who, how, what dose, what microdystrophin, but the fact is we're here. When 30 years ago we were just dreaming about it, we're here now, so the world and the landscape will change, and hopefully very rapidly. So as I mentioned, these are early days. How long is this gene therapy going to last? What's the durability of it? How will we redose these children? So we're already thinking about redosing, because you don't want to get to the point where you say, we need to redose. Let's think about that, because we need to redose and be planning for it now, because we don't know how long it'll last. There are challenges to manufacturing the virus. So those have to be overcome as well. Solid and Pfizer are going forward as well, and they're here to talk about their efforts and what they plan to do to expand. CBER, the Center for Biologics. So in the FDA, there's one arm which is CDER, Center for Drugs, and the other arm is CBER, Center for Biologics. So all the gene therapies come out of CBER. So when we think of the traditional phase 1 through 3 trials, and you know phase 1 is usually a safety study, and then there's a dose-finding trial, and then there's a phase 3, which is a pivotal trial, and then you get a decision, and it takes seemingly forever. The CBER knows and has a great deal of experience with gene therapy trials, and they know that they have to rethink that clinical trial process. What do they need to see before they approve something? What do they need to know? What do we need to know before they approve something? What does benefit risk look like in this situation? So they are coming out with 6 new guidance documents, 3 on manufacturing and 3 with a clinical focus. They said to us just a few days ago that it would be weeks. I think we shouldn't say weeks because I think we'll be disappointed. The FDA moves a little bit slowly, but I think before the end of the summer, we'll see these guidance documents and we'll see how they're rethinking and reestablishing the paradigm to get a gene therapy approved and over the line. And I think we're all excited about that opportunity. So these are my 2 little guys when they were babies, and this is my son Patrick doing the Brooks scale. So all those in the audience who are familiar with the Brooks scale, he could do it at that time. So I thank you, and with that, I present to you Stan Nelson.